everybody, and welcome to Recapped with Established. I'm your host, Rich Maloy, and with me today is Jacqui Dietrich. And I need to maximize my screen. There we go. All right. Thanks, Jacqui, for joining today.
All right.
So each week, Startup of the Year holds office hours for startups in our network. And office hours are private, so the founders are comfortable sharing what's top of mind for them. But we get together at the end of the office hours to talk about what's on founders' minds and to share the advice that we gave to those founders with you all, our viewers. And so if you're a startup and you'd like access to these office hours, you can apply to Startup of the Year by going to soti.link/SOTY 2020. I will put that link in the chat right now. And as I'm tabbing around here, and also we would like to invite you to join us for our .us veteran pitch competition on July 23rd. That's going to be a lot of fun. We have 5 veteran-founded organizations and 5 judges ready to evaluate those pitches. Be a quick session where we're going to just dive into types of businesses that founders are creating. And this is in partnership with the .us brand, and we're also offering a free .us domain. And so if you want a .us domain, if you want to apply for Startup of the Year, all of that is available at startupofyear.com. So thank you for being here today. And joining us today is Jacqui Dietrich. Hi, Jacqui.
Hi, Rich.
Once again, doing office hours, good times.
Here we are.
Yeah. So
I think it's the highlight of the week.
What did you say?
That's the highlight of the week.
It is. Meeting with founders is always a highlight for me. Always makes me happy. Always come away loving to hear about the businesses that people are building and the problems that they're trying to solve. Would love to hear what's top of mind. What were you hearing from founders this week?
First of all, I wanted to plug again that event on July 23rd. I talked with a lot of the startups that I've been talking to about attending those events because it's such an awesome opportunity to hear the kinds of questions that investors ask.
Yeah.
And you get to hear like their thought process on how they're evaluating startups that are covering such a large range of product and service fits. So just a second plug for.
I'll dig in on that as well, because the hard part with all pitch competitions, but especially now with the virtual ones, is that all the judges have a rubric, right? And so they are evaluating you against this rubric. And if you're not answering the questions on the rubric for them, then they have to use the Q&A time to get that information from you, right? And so the best thing to do is make sure that you're hitting all the points on the rubric, so at the Q&A time, they can really use to dig deeper into the business and find out your brilliance instead of just getting the basics covered. Oh, how do you make money? How are you going to market? Tell us about the team, right? The biggest thing that I see founders miss in pitch competitions is they go, and here's our team, and it's a bunch of faces and a bunch of logos. Okay, and on to the next thing. It's like, no. Why are you the expert in this?
So wait, I talked a little bit about, I had one founder that I spoke with this week that was fairly new to her startup and was actually a transitioning military veteran. So she is coming at this with, not a lot of industry experience or having been in, seeing other founders with startups. And so she's, navigating all of this for the first time and is really trying to get a feel for resources that are out there. And, that was really one of the questions she led with, or, what are the most important elements of what an investor looks for in a startup, and just trying to think about what a rubric looks like. And so the things that we talked about are your people, your product, and your pipeline. And that, the people, it's not just talking about your team, but really what are their roles? Do you have a marketer? Do you have an operator? Do you have the right technician? And if not, how are you going about looking for that? Is that an ask that you have for the investor? I mean, a lot of times if you find the right investors, they're the ones who can help you find or help to fill one of those roles while you're growing your startup. And then, with product, it's that uniqueness piece. And then with pipeline, really showing when you talk to an investor, like your forecasts and what are the features, what are the channels that you're attacking? Like what are those elements that are unique to you? What do you recommend in terms of, what a startup has to have at the ready to be prepared for an investor conversation?
Yeah, I think the founding team is super important, and in the why is, entrepreneurship is hard of any sort, whether you're starting an HVAC servicing business, or you're trying to build a high tech SaaS application, or or consumer packaged goods product, right? It's hard. It's really, really hard. So why are you the right person for this? Why are you dedicated to solving this problem? What really drives you and motivates you to make sure that you will see this through, right? So the last thing that you want to hear as an investor is, oh, we gave it a good run. Like, well, no, no, that's not the idea here, right? The idea is that if we're investing in you, that you're giving it every every ounce of energy that you have, until you realize that there's either nothing left to do, or it's just not for you anymore, and you find somebody else to take it on, right? So if you're new and you don't have that domain expertise, or if you're new to the industry, for example, you can at least talk about why this problem is important to you, and why you want to solve it, and how committed you are to that. And stories also really help with getting those points across. So they're much more memorable than just saying I'm committed to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the other things that investors are looking for, it's so hard, because every investor has their own opinion, and every investor is convinced that they're right? And I mean, that's how you go out and you raise a fund, is you say, here's our thesis, and we're going to execute on this thesis, right?
Yeah.
I'm of the mindset of having that deep domain expertise, and having truly transformative technology, because we're looking for venture scale returns, right? And so sometimes I look at businesses and I think, this is an amazing business, and I think this should exist in the world, but venture capital will be the death of this business. And so the business needs a different vehicle, like a revenue-based financing, for example, where you can take the revenue that you're earning and get in it, basically, wouldn't call it a loan, but you're getting an investment that you pay back out of future revenues. So, I love your people, problem, and pipeline. Those are great aspects, right? Because every investor is going to want to see traction. And what is traction, right? It could, at the very beginning, just be some great pilots that you're getting, and so that can fill into your pipeline.
And I love that if you think about it in those three categories, then it makes it much easier for organizations like ours, who consider it our mission to help you build your resource network, and leveraging our network to connect you to investors, or to connect you to resources that might make your startup job a little easier. That if you can come at it from that approach, it's often easier for us to find the kinds of investors that are truly a value add to you.
Yes.
So really having like that crispness around what kind of investor you're looking for, and what would make the most strategic fit for you.
Yes.
And having thought through that when you come into like an office hours kind of setting, or something where you can leverage someone else's network, it's being able to articulate that is so powerful.
Yes.
And the founders that do that, it's just like what you were saying with how we think about startups, that they can think of us the same way, of like being able to really quickly say, this is what I need, helps us to be that much more creative in how we can tap into our network. So I really appreciate the founders who come into platforms like Startup of the Year with that mentality.
Yep, absolutely. And even knowing what are the specific investors. Oh, do you have a connection to Math Ventures in Chicago? Oh, actually we do, right? And so just one that comes to mind that's been asked for from people recently, right? So make those specific asks. Here's my dream list of 10 investors. Who do you know from this list? And there's a great resource out there that I think is starting to get some network effects, and it's called Signal. From NFX. And so NFX is a venture fund that invests in network effects businesses, and the platform is called Signal. So signal.nfx.com. And it's like a free CRM for investors. And you can see who invests in ad tech, and who invests in aerospace, and who invests in underrepresented founders. And so that's a great place to do just like high level research and build your wish list.
Startup of the Year sees a pretty wide range of the types of startups, just based on the eligibility that's stated in who should apply. It's startups that have raised less than $5 million. So we see, some startups that their strategy is really bootstrapping and trying to build their revenue base before they're coming in looking for funding. It's a range. So I've seen a couple of founders in doing office hours that are still trying to understand if venture capital is even right for them. What's the litmus test that, what's your response to a startup who asks that question of how do I know if venture capital is right for me?
Yeah. It's what, so first it would be, what do you want to do with the business and how big do you want the business to get? Right. So if you are interested in scaling this business to to hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, to hundreds or thousands of employees, and if you're interested in seeing this go, and go down that path, that is definitely the venture capital route. If you are interested in building a business that employs you and gives you a good income and to build and grow and step scale the business, venture capital may or may not be the right fit for you, right? The one thing you have to remember with venture capital is that it's a treadmill, and the treadmill only gets faster and steeper. And it has its benefits for organizations that really need to go out and be in a winner-take-all environment, right? We have to own this market. We've got to get out ahead of it very quickly. This is, before the competition takes over, there's network effects that we need to build, right? So there are advantages to venture capital. It really, really, pours gas on the fire to help that growth, right? But there are prices to pay. Is that you need to raise money, and then you need to go out and raise money again, and then you need to go out and raise money again, and then you need to go out and raise money again. And so the expectation is that you're going to use that money. You're going to burn it, right? You're going to burn through your capital. That's why it's called burn. Your burn rate, right, is how much money are you spending each month. So, there's a particular way to build and grow a business with venture capital dollars, and it's not the way that you would build and grow most businesses. And so the other piece with that also is that you give up a portion of your company. And so the more that you raise and the more frequently that you do it, the more of your company that you give up. And it doesn't always mean control, although eventually it will mean that you give up control. But it does mean that you're giving up your ownership percentage, right? So what is your focus, right? And again, I've said this before, and I love investing on a venture capital mindset, and I really do truly enjoy that. But it's not for everybody, and it shouldn't be, right? And so I think that there is a need for way more businesses out there that are not venture capital built and grown, right? 10 businesses that employ 10 people instead of one business that employs 100 people. Like there's benefits to having that to the American economy.
Absolutely. And I love the work that our team that established has always done to kind of break the stigma that venture capital is necessary for entrepreneurs to succeed, and that Startup of the Year can be a platform for, any high potential kind of startup, kind of regardless of whether venture capital is truly what you're looking for.
Yep.
So
Yep. I met a founder a few weeks ago that she was adamant. She's like, I'm not going to raise venture capital. I want to bootstrap my business and find alternative paths to capital, right? And they're out there increasingly so. So it's, I think that was a great approach for her.
I heard you were helping a couple of the founders that you meet work on term sheets.
Yes. Yeah. Two of them negotiating term sheets, which is always exciting. I've definitely seen a lot of investment activity in the last 2 or 3 months, contrary to what you may expect. The activity is pretty active. One founder has a high profile venture firm that put that they're negotiating a term sheet with. And, there's great books about this. Venture Deals by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelsohn is a great book. It's on its 4th edition. But it's a lot of that book is focused on the series investment, Series A and beyond. And the seed phase is a different animal completely, right? No one firm takes the whole round. And so you need to get all the investors to the table, my analogy is a pool party, right? So you got to get all the investors in the pool. But first you got to get them to the edge of the pool. And before you do that, you got to get them to show up at the pool party. And so, we talk a lot about the psychology of that and using the interest that you have to generate more interest. And so, knowing that you're not going to fill the entire round from your lead investor, but knowing that you've got a big name lead investor, that founder has a huge advantage to start running and start generating interest again from investors that they may have met 6 to 12 months ago. So two different founders, two different term sheets, talking a lot about about negotiating those term sheets in advance while still soft circling the rest of their investor interest to try and get them to the table. So you can bring everybody to the table at once and say, okay, here's the term sheet. We're closing in 30 days. Would love to have you in. And deadlines are key to this too.
Oh, like what? How do you do that?
Well, once you have a term sheet, you've got a deadline that you need to set and say, we're not taking any investment past this date, right? And that any investment past, it could be 30 days, 45 days, or 60 days. I've seen them as far as 90 days, but there's no sense in having a 90-day deadline when you could have serve the same purpose in 60 days, right? So if you do your work in advance and then you set your deadline, you can stick to your deadline. A perfect example of why deadlines are important are taxes in 2020, filing taxes in 2020. So let's just say hypothetically there was a guy named Rich, and he lived in a country where the government had a tax deadline, right, of April 15th, and then there was a crazy pandemic and they extended the tax deadline to July 15th.
That could never happen.
That could never happen. I know. And imagine if you had additional time to prepare your documents to get them filed, to get your taxes filed in time. And then July 15th came and your accountant is saying, hey, would you like us to file an extension? Right? Deadlines are so critical, right? That so there's deadlines and then there's deadlines. And, but if you put a deadline down and you know that that's the absolute last time that you can take money in, you will have people scrambling to get into that round on the very last day. And so that's why you have to have a deadline, is because people are not going to respond to it otherwise. Because I know with my taxes, I can wait until October 15th. So why am I rushing this? So talk to me on October 14th about how my taxes are going, right? Because I'll probably be doing them that day.
So that's a really key piece of the psychology of fundraising that you often talk about.
Yes.
What are the other high level components of what you consider to be the psychology of fundraising that's so important for founders at that seed stage to know?
It's that pool party analogy, in the underlying element of this, I said earlier, is that no seed fund is big enough to take the whole round. And so everybody wants to know that you have enough money to raise this round to go out and run the business for 12 to 18 months. Now that runway expectation is 18 to 24 months, by the way, right? So if I put in $100,000, what good does that do you? That's barely a head count, after taxes. So, the important part here is that you need to get all of these investors comfortable that there's going to be enough money in that you're going to have the runway where you can get back to building the business. So when you're fundraising, you're spending 80% of your time fundraising, and the business starts to lag. So we don't want this to happen every 6 months. Why would I give you money now when you're gonna have to go out and raise again in 6 months? So that's one piece there. The other piece is that time is before a VC writes a check, time is their ally. After they write a check, time is their enemy. So if you don't have your raise together, if you say, oh yeah, we're raising $1 million, I've got $100,000 committed. Okay, let me know. If you say we're raising $500,000 and I've got $400,000 committed. Oh, well, I need to leave. Whoa. So tell me about this. What's going on, right? And I've literally had these reactions with people consciously knowing that about my own talk that I give about the psychology of fundraising. I've had founders that have used this on me, right? And I'm like, oh, really? Well, we were just like thinking about it, but tell me more, right? Now that you have more interest. So, if I wanted to be mean about it, I could say that all seed investors are sheep, myself included. But I like the pool party analogy better. You got to make sure that there's enough people at the edge of the pool so that everybody can see each other around, that we're all taking a look. And I know not everybody's going to get in the pool, But then once people start getting in the pool, your job is to push as many people into the pool as possible, and then go around to everybody else and say, look how much fun everybody's having in the pool. We'd love to have you in.
That makes sense.
Oh, I'm bouncing around on my analogy there, but that's the gist of it, right? Is, just, you got to play to that psychology, that group think psychology, and know that it exists.
Well, there's a fundraising piece, but then there's also the work just of getting exposure for your startups. That was another topic that came up for me. And I love asking you this question because you have a lot of success as a business development professional as well. And that it's like, how do you just build awareness for like revenue generating opportunities and get the word out about the product and service that you're working on? So that was a question that came up. And I think this founder was just so smart because she recognized that we had a network that could provide helpful resources, not just in terms of the investor network, but that we also have a lot of corporate innovation or corporate clients that are really interested in working with startups that are involved in Startup of the Year. And so we talked about like she's doing like crazy dedicated work around LinkedIn, like driving business leads that way. But I asked her why she got involved in or applied to Startup of the Year, and it was very much like an opportunity to be on the stage and present what she's working on in front of an audience, and that helps to just increase the niches that are in the audience that she's gained. And I think some of the clever things, when we talked through some of those ideas, it's like using networking events in clever ways of write your own content after you attend a virtual event in your topic area, and create that kind of thought leadership that can then be shared on social. Or like for her, LinkedIn is such a huge lead gen that if she can also be like driving using those network events to drive toward her expertise in this area, that's a really cool way of gaining those professional connections. But that it could even be shared with the organizer afterward. They're always looking for content too from like attendees who had a great experience. And then the other thing was using lists of online directories to get in front of new audiences in whatever way that looks like for your industry. But like even HubSpot has lists of 50 organizations that you can help to promote your startup. So what do you say to startups who have that question around like gaining exposure to decision makers or to the right audiences?
I mean, Jacqui, you hit it all, right? I mean, that's brilliant. I love your answer and your suggestions there. The networking, one of my rules to live by is you never know unless you ask. And that was from my grandma, who was an amazing woman. And that was something that she always said, you never know unless you ask. And so you really hit the nail on the head, because you never know who knows somebody else, right? So one of the ways you can utilize that is just ask for referrals. Who else should I be talking to? Who do you think this would be a good fit for, right? And leave those open-ended questions out there. The LinkedIn is great as well if you're in the B2B space. LinkedIn has great tools for that. Make sure though that your outreach to people is whiffed, what's in it for them, and not all about yourself and your feature and your product, right? And so that outreach should be very focused on your audience. I mean, you probably get these things. Oh, I'm looking to expand my LinkedIn network. Ignore, right? And I have a huge LinkedIn network because I've been building it since 2004, I guess, or whatever. But 6, when did LinkedIn start? But I don't take people into my network that are just saying I'm looking to expand and I'd love to tell you about my product. It's like I'm sure you'd love to tell me about your product. Why do I care, right? So that's an important piece. And yeah, network. I mean, especially now, it's so hard to network with there being no events and they're all virtual. So you've got to work extra hard to make those contacts and those connections.
When you see these founders that have like a technical product, so like a software service, let's say, and they're trying to find decision makers within like a corporate setting, what advice do you give them about how to navigate finding that decision maker? Or
there's a great approach that SendGrid used early on, and they're now Twilio, but that SendGrid used early on, and that's the bottom up approach. And make it so that it can be used for free up to a certain point to accomplish a specific thing by anybody within an enterprise, right? And it was maybe a little bit more freewheeling and a little bit, easier to do, 5-6 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago now. But as there's way more developer tools out there, and corporations are much more restrictive on this, but it's still possible to get inroads into an organization from the bottom up, keep track of who those people are, what those organizations are, make them sign up with a business, address instead of a Gmail or a Hotmail or something like that, right? So make sure it's a business address they're signing up with, and then follow up in that organization to find additional people that you can use that you can use. So,
smart.
Always like that approach. Well, we've just got a couple more minutes here. Man, oh man, this is great. Could always just talk about startups and helping them move the ball forward. Lots of activities still happening out there. One thing I did, I met with some of the earliest stage founders. They have a physical product. They sell direct to consumers, and one of the very basic things was that they didn't have landing pages, right? And they were not utilizing landing pages in their social media marketing campaign. Entirely bootstrapped, tested out some paid advertising, like $50 here, $50 there, right? But just the idea, send them to MailChimp to go check out what how to use landing pages and capture email addresses and.
Same conversation.
Oh, really?
Landing pages, yes.
Yeah, totally. Landing pages, right? And make sure it's WIFT. What's in it for them, right? And they had a few different verticals or ways that they could target. It's like, here's the ecological play, right? And here's the convenience angle, and here's the budget, cost saving angle. And so, a lot of different. So you have different landing pages for different campaigns that you run. So that was it's always fun to talk to founders and be able to share resources that you just weren't aware of.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Any parting thoughts for the week, Jacqui, before we head into the rest of the day and then the weekend?
Never stop starting up.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah. That's good. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, if you'd like access to office hours with myself, Jacqui, and our other mentors from the Startup of the Year community, you can apply to Startup of the Year. And definitely please join us on July 23rd for our .us veteran pitch competition. All this you can find out about and more at startupofyear.com. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend.